All right. Well, I am excited to have Holly Levanto, VP of Booz Allen's AI practice. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's great to meet you, and thanks for inviting me to speak with you today.
Of course. No, it's lovely to have you. So I want to tee up what we're going to discuss today, and I'm really looking forward to it because there's a lot to unpack here. Um, Artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming military operations and strategies, offering unprecedented capabilities in areas such as surveillance and data analysis and autonomous systems. AI-driven technologies can enhance decision-making clearly, like it does with everything else, to improve precision of weaponry, optimization of logistics, leading to more efficient and effective military actions. However, the integration of AI into the military also raises ethical and security concerns, particularly regarding autonomous weaponry systems and the potential for unintended consequences. As nations start to continue to invest in this space, AI research and development, the future of military operations will likely be shaped by the balance between leveraging these advanced technologies and addressing the associated risks. Ultimately, the good news is that the responsible use of AI in the military could lead to and enhance security and stability, but it requires careful consideration of ethical standards and international regulations. So, as we start to think about these types of things, I really want to take a huge step back and ask you, Holly, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your career journey and what
Yeah.
led you to Booz Allen and your current role.
Well, let's start with Booz Allen. Booz Allen was founded in 1914. We're 110 years young, as we like to say. And our actual first U.S. government client was the U.S. Navy. And I am a Navy veteran.
Ah,
I was hired through our Booz Allen military hiring program at the time. It was one of the predecessors to our relationship with hiring our heroes that we still do today. And what was exciting about it was I knew about Booz Allen's reputation. I'd heard about it not only through my work in government, but also through some work in academia, that Booz Allen was really a leader at that time in analytics for federal policy and government. So I went to an open hiring fair with all the capabilities of Booz Allen laid out, whether it was strategy, analytics, organizational design, digital transformation, technology. And I got to talk to everyone in the room. I had a dance card based off of my resume, but I got to go and talk to anyone that I spoke with that was around the room. And I was really drawn into strategy at that time and about how we could make significant change in the department. I had mission understanding. I saw there could be room for change. And so I started at Booz Allen in our strategy area. And through more and more engagement with strategy, I kept looking at performance. How do we know we've achieved that strategy? What does the data say about achievement of that strategy? What should our next targets be? And it grew and grew into a love of analytics that I was applying actually, and with the Air Force and a patient safety problem. I actually had a very intelligent client ask me the question. We were tracking against medical errors and trying to look at a strategy to decrease patient safety errors. And they said, well, what's the probability? What's the probability of error based off of some of the different indicators that we have in this space, the type of operation, the type of care, all of these different elements. And I said, I know what I normally say when I talk to any client is, I don't know the answer to that, but I know someone at Booz Allen does. And so I got to reach out to one of my colleagues who had already been doing risk modeling with the IRS around trying to find fraud, and brought him over to apply him to this problem. And I really got passionate about what we could do with machine learning, understanding modeling, and how that can apply to federal government and strategy. And really the rest is history. I've been engaged in our analytic and AI work and some of our largest data platforms with the Department of Defense for years now.
Fantastic. My goodness. A wonderful background in this space as it's led you in the direction of where you are today. My understanding is that you were in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Is that right?
Yes, I was. There was a lot going on at that time, Operation Iraqi Freedom, some anti-piracy operations, and I was a surface warfare officer. So I was on ships, first a fuels and engineering officer on my first ship, the USS Gunston Hall, and then the navigator on board the USS San Antonio on its maiden voyage.
Wow, amazing. So if you start to think about what you know today and what you've been working on for the last several years, and you go back in time, are there ways that you could apply some of today's tech towards what you were working on back then?
Oh man, I wish I could have. I wish I could have a time machine and go back. We like to think at Booz Allen of AI supporting missions and empowering people. One mission that really comes to mind, I mentioned the fuels background and navigation. And I had the combination of both of those when a message came down around the optimal speed to be able to drive our diesel engines to conserve fuel. That came down from leadership that should be applied across all of the different ships of our class. And from my understanding of my own data, I understood our fuels, I understood the efficiency and what I was seeing in the engine systems. The guidance that I provided matched the data. Luckily, I had a great commanding officer at that time. I was talking about this concern that I had, and they said, okay, write a point paper, provide your evidence, we'll send it up, we'll see what we can do to adjust the strategy. But wouldn't it have been better if we actually were using the data to drive the policy, to understand what was going on out in the ships and be able to drive that towards what could be optimal policy, not just the things that were in the intent and the engineering diagrams. We do a lot today in my current work around understanding logistics and supply, specifically fuels. We've done some modeling around fuel usage, specifically in the Indo-Pacific. That has been something that has come to mind for me is if we were back in that time, that I could have understood my data, been able to drive that towards policy, and then made that a standard to make sure that we were being efficient. And then on the people side of that, something very near to me is in any situation in military, there's an inherent risk. Just it's part of the nature of the job. And one of the hard areas around risk is the mental strain that comes through military service, the situations you're being pulled in and out of. And we've seen that now in our data. After I actually left my second ship, I found out that one of my former sailors had taken his own life on a watch. And that hit me hard. It made me think about what I could have done, how I could have understood or talked to him earlier or provided resources to him earlier in the time that I was, working with him side by side every day. And that took me to some work that I was able to do with the US Navy in recent years around the Commander's Risk Mitigation Dashboard. And that is around trying to understand destructive behaviors and in organizations, and give commanders a heads up if their data is saying, hey, we have, it's a stressful environment. Maybe it's the shipyard. Maybe it's a recent return from deployment. Maybe there's some familial changes that have happened, a recent separation or loss of child. That those things, understanding what broader indicators there are, and not singling individuals out, but saying what resources can we provide to them? How can we give their command a chance to, pause, have a safety stand down with all of the organization to say, hey, look out for your colleagues. Like, this is a stressful time. There's a lot of change going on. And so I think many people who've experienced that type of loss wish that they could have done something. And I feel like with our work today, we're starting to be able to preempt that and prepare.
No, those are two very good examples. One very practical, and the other more human centric, which is absolutely essential these days. No question whatsoever. So, no, those are wonderful. I really appreciate you bringing those to light. Um, as we start to think about this a little bit more, what other directions do you see AI going in with the military? What other use cases potentially could be out there that maybe we haven't started to think about or look at that are possible?
Yeah, I think when I talk with family, friends, we talk about the kind of work that I do. I think there's a lot of stir around the fear of using artificial intelligence for defense missions. Um, and I am actually more concerned if we do not use AI for our defense missions. And let me explain that. Um, there is a vast amount of information that is out there and available in the world. Some of that information hasn't been truly translated into data that can be synthesized yet. I think that's part of what the Department of Defense is working towards right now. How do we make sure that we have usable data? But that information is important to be able to make the most important strategic decisions. The military to date has educated or gotten information to some of their commanding officers through rotations of experience. They do different jobs, they move around, and then ultimately they should have a pretty broad understanding to be able to understand how to make decisions because they've had that vast experience. What if that experience was not just theirs, but by the information and experiences of others, and that could be synthesized in a way that it could have co-generation for leaders to still remain in the loop, but not have to just make decisions based off of their gut, but instead based off of the experiences of others and all of the data that's at their disposal. I think that is what I'm most excited about, is about making the right decisions and making them informed. And I'd also say in the world, there is use of AI that's growing within other countries and some that may see us as their competition. And so I'm excited about what the Department of Defense is doing to invest in AI, and excited to be supporting it as the largest service provider of AI for the federal government.
No, it's amazing. And I couldn't agree with you more. For better or for worse, I've been talking about AI for the last 10 years. And one of the things that I
Yeah.
used to talk about was that, and initially people are like, no, that's impossible. But the idea that it's almost impossible to become an expert these days in something because there's so much information being generated for that person to actually absorb, understand, retain, and then sort of conceptualize all of these things about one particular matter is very difficult. So when you can have this sort of augmented intelligence come along that allows you to be able to digest more of it and then have commonsensical decisions based off of that, as well as analytics, hugely important for everyone to be able to take advantage of these things. So I totally agree with you on that part. One of the things that I'm curious about, and I've talked with some of your colleagues about in the past, is sort of this debate about open source versus the closed ecosystems. What are your thoughts on both of those and how they potentially could benefit or be challenges for either one of them?
Well, I think a closed ecosystem is really important in some of the areas that I work in, for data security, making sure that the right need to know is available of certain types of information. So I think some of the work that has been closed off within the Department of Defense is essential for us to have information that's available to us, but then making sure that there are security controls in place so that that doesn't leak out to those that don't need that information. But I'd say there's room for both, and open is critical for innovations. We've seen adoption of open source AI models that have been out that have been out broadly and applying those to some of our defense missions. Again, there are some concerns that we have to have around that to make sure that we're not introducing anything that would be an issue from cybersecurity from a DoD perspective, but also if there is an instance where we have seen that the Department of Defense is opening up their models for broader use so that they can increase that innovation, ensuring that the data that they were training that on doesn't get revealed through that open sourcing. So I see room for both. I mean, really, if we are going to move forward in adoption of AI solutions, we do need to harness the understanding and knowledge of many. And so that's why Booz Allen has been really focused on developing standard solutions like Assemble and trying to open source that to have a standard that people are using, an integrated approach to design, development, and delivery of AI solutions across the engineering lifecycle. Because if we're coming from a more unified space and understanding and applying our lessons learned with each other, there's so much we can do to innovate on the next step. So Booz Allen's excited to be a leader in doing that by open sourcing our Assemble solution.
So just maybe dig a little bit further on that. Assemble, I'm assuming, is a set of guidelines, or what is that?
It builds on software and machine learning best practices. And it's really around standardizing AI solution designs. So there's code base that's associated with it. It includes data processing, model building, tuning, training, operational deployment. There's a toolkit that's out there in open source. You can look for it on Booz Allen's website, but I believe it's posted out on GitHub also.
Okay, excellent. No, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. So I was at a conference recently in DC, and one of the things that the top military brass discussed was that how much has changed over the last, let's say, even 5 years, where they would, in the previous decades, apparently, they would actually build a lot of things in-house themselves. And now they're leveraging a lot from outside sources, whether it's private companies or, of course, consultants. So they're seeing much more of that, and they're not doing as much in-house. Is that something that you're also aware of and seeing?
I guess it's where you are in the department. There are certain areas of the department that I've been able to work with that have some of the best data scientists and machine learning engineers in the Department of Defense, and some of them are in uniform, some of them are civilian, and some of them are Booz Allen consultants working with them side by side. So I do see that there has been a shift based off of old and antiquated acquisitions, that things used to take time. They'd purchase things, they'd bring it in-house. There was a slower turn for innovation, but especially since the evolution of ChatGPT, there's been just this overwhelming interest and I guess democratization of AI that has happened, where people are wanting to dig in and solve things for themselves. One of the things that has been valuable that I've seen both in the Department of Defense and that Booz Allen is helping them with, and within Booz Allen, is this investment in education around AI, not just AI for the data scientist, for the engineer, but AI for the policymaker, AI for the people who are, embedded in missions. Booz Allen's taken a third of our employees through an AI awareness course. Our goal is all of them, so that they understand what AI can and can't do, what the current applications of it are in mission sets, how to advise against it well, how to be responsible in the application of it, or even in the way that we collect data and use data. And I've seen that also in the Department of Defense. There's been a lot of investment in both their acquisitions community and in their executive community around education of what AI can provide to them and what it may be able to do in the future. Because we want to make sure that we are not creating the sense that AI is a panacea. It is appropriate for discrete processes and problems with a human in the loop. And it's not going to solve all of the problems. It might unveil more problems that need to be solved that maybe you didn't see before. And so I'm excited about the work we've been doing to educate some executive leaders in the Department of Defense in, being able to identify snake oil salesmen, to understand what applications are going to work for their mission and what kinds of questions to ask, especially around their data and the use of their data. So I think that it has changed, and I think in most cases for the better.
Okay, no, I really appreciate that perspective. That's fantastic. So maybe one of the last questions I have before I'll turn it over to you, if there's anything else you'd like to add, is something that I've been, debating with all sorts of people all over the world for quite some time now. And like I mentioned, I'm also huge in the education around AI, and I have been. And I've been talking about exponential growth of technology for years. And I knew this stuff would start to happen, and now it's really, really happening. And I think people have all sort of caught on to it. And one of the questions that comes up frequently for people is around AGI, so artificial general intelligence, and where it goes from here and how fast things progress. Now, I will respect you at your role. And if you want to answer this as an individual, or if you want to answer it on behalf of the company, that's great, whichever works for you. But where do you see this going? Where do you see this potential for the next 5, maybe 10 years out? What types of things should we be anticipating or thinking about in that space?
Thanks for the question. It's a hard one.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think still the concept of artificial general intelligence is theoretical. There are glimmers of potential in what we've seen with ChatGPT's release, some of the other solutions that we're taking individual tasks and being able to execute against a discrete task and replace maybe an element of human cognition. But I think doing the work to do each of those discrete tasks well, to solve for whether it is natural language processing or the things we've been doing for object detection, video analysis, that if we are doing each of those well, organically, those could come together and to human-like intelligence. I think it's in the distance. I think it shows it represents how important it is for us today to focus on responsible AI in its application, even in artificial narrow intelligence, to make sure that we are doing things right from the beginning. And then as that application grows and there can be more connections between that, then maybe it could move towards human-like intelligence or self-teaching, but that we've put the appropriate guardrails in place. I would say I'm not speaking from Booz Allen on this perspective, because I think I'm speaking from Booz Allen on the importance of responsible AI, but I don't think that Booz Allen has our strategy set on artificial general intelligence. We want to set our strategy based off of what's going to empower our customers, empower people to change the world, empower the Department of Defense and the federal government. So we really have to follow their lead. And I think for the foreseeable future, we'll have a human in the loop. But for now, on narrow intelligence, we have to make sure that we're doing everything right so that that will then be applied if we do get a state of AGI.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I totally respect what you're saying with regard to the idea that the focus for you, for the organization, is really on what the agencies are thinking about, more on the shorter term, but maybe going further out, which is very difficult. In this, it's difficult to predict where we may go. I mean, sometimes think when I'm looking at these things 2.5 to 3 years before we get there, which is not that far out. This is my own personal view, and when I talk to people, it could be 10 years, but certainly within that realm, we're going to see something like that from my perspective, based on some of the data that's coming out. But it's going to be wild, and I think hopefully, as you said, it's really about AI alignment. So making sure that we're all thinking about the guardrails as much as possible, even though when you can have some of these open source models that are out there, that may change the dynamic a bit. But
Right.
no, it's going to be something that's going to be fascinating to watch, and
It
hopefully
is.
we'll see how it goes.
I mean, I gotta tell you, when I got out of the Navy 14 years ago, I could not imagine that I would be standing here talking to you about artificial general intelligence, or that I would be even in the AI community. And I think that's a testament to not only the rapid change, but also the development and support that I've gotten through my career, to be able to grow and change and learn, and to be supported in that. So I'm excited for what's going to happen, but I I'm very confident that, our part of it, Booz Allen's part of it, is going to be very much driven by our principles and our values. Booz Allen has guiding principles around AI that are, human-centered, human governance for systems where it's appropriate, and encouraging the same for our client systems, understanding risk and our responsibility and our practices. Like that is we are a values-centered organization, and I love that we apply that in our technology.
No, fantastic. My goodness, Holly. Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Yeah, it's been so great talking with you, Joe. I hope to do it again sometime.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thank you.